everyone, and welcome to this week's Squiggly Careers podcast. I'm Sarah, and I'm joined by my co-host Helen.
Hello everybody.
And this week, particularly today, is a particularly special day for all things squiggly. So for those of you who follow us on Instagram or connected with us on LinkedIn, you will have seen that in the Sunday Times every month they publish a list of business bestsellers, and today we were number one.
Hooray!
Which is amazing.
It is amazing.
And we know that so many of our listeners will have been some of the first people to pre-order back in September, October last year, or perhaps you just ordered it 2 weeks ago. But we are incredibly grateful and really appreciative to everyone who's gone out and kind of bought the book. Before kind of you could really read any reviews or anything like that, I think it's always a bit of a leap of faith for people. And it's paid off. And if you'd have told us that we could be top of a business bestseller list where, you know, you sell more books than people like Simon Sinek or the founder of Nike, albeit they sell quite a lot every month, to be fair to them. But, you know, this month, no one can take away from the fact that we have sold more books than they have. And it's one of those things that for us, I guess we've been working hard on it for a long time. And we were just saying actually how you sort of can potentially take it for granted because it's lots and lots of kind of small actions over a long period of time. But we are just taking a moment on this Sunday to just give ourselves a tiny pat on the back, and a pat on the back extended to every one of our listeners for helping us to get to that number one.
I think an extended pat on the back is like a sort of a giant hug. I'm thinking it's like with lots of things. So yeah, huge thanks.
And the podcast, for anyone who is new, or perhaps you're listening for maybe the first or second time, we always cover any and all kind of topics affecting work today. So whether it's how to improve your gravitas to exploring future career possibilities, what we really want to do with this podcast is to help everyone listening spend as much time enjoying and kind of thriving in your squiggly careers as possible, and in those tough moments, bounce back as quickly as possible. So if there's ever a topic or a theme or an idea for a podcast episode that you'd like us to cover that in our previous 120 episodes we've not kind of discussed before, please do get in touch with us. You can just message us on Instagram where we're just at AmazingIf, or you can email us at getintouch@amazingif.com. We always really like to hear listener suggestions.
Interestingly, I think some of the messages that we've had most recently, like over on email or Instagram, whatever, have most commonly come from people that have either been listening to the How to Be Brilliant in a New Job episode or How to Cope with Restructures and Redundancies episode. So there's obviously is a period of change. Some people looking for new roles, some people find themselves in a difficult situation. So we're getting loads of messages about those ones. And when we actually recorded those quite a while ago. So if you are in either of those situations, maybe those are good places to start with those past podcasts that we've done.
And so today we're on episode 121 and we're going to be talking about setting boundaries at work. This was something that Helen covered in one of her daily career tips on Instagram, and it got a really good reaction. People really interested, wanted to learn more. So we thought it was kind of worthy of a full podcast topic. And really what we're talking about when we say boundaries at work are two things. Firstly, what you're prepared to hold yourself accountable for, which I think is definitely one of those things that's easy to say and we all know really hard to do. I think the other thing about boundaries, it's about not only holding yourself to account for things, but also knowing what's really important to you and sticking to that and kind of putting yourself first. Brené Brown, I think, actually does put this really nicely, where she says, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves, even when we risk disappointing others. We can't base our own worthiness on others' approval. Only when we believe deep down that we are enough can we say, enough. Which I just thought, as much as I'm not always a fan of a kind of cheesy quote or statement, or not quite as much of a fan as Helen is, I did actually think she did articulate that pretty well in terms of knowing what really matters to us, seeing it through, and also being confident that when we do see it through, it's the right thing for us. And in work today, probably more important than ever.
Yeah, I think so. So Sarah and I talk a lot, obviously, about squiggly careers and the squiggly career. And if you think about the way that work looks today and what the reality of a lot of us are experiencing is work that is maybe always on, because technology means that we're sort of working more, and that sort of boundary between work and home, where work doesn't necessarily switch off when you leave the office, even if you are in an office now. There's a sort of an always on nature to work. I think also the volume of work that many of us are managing, that's a part of the reality of a lot of what we're experiencing. And I think that means that some of the boundaries that we used to have, kind of staircase like careers when people were doing 9 to 5, slightly more structured roles, slightly more structured experience of work, some of those boundaries have become blurred. And whether it's about the blurring of the boundary between the work that you do in your sort of work hours and then what bleeds into your out of work hours, or maybe it's about the sort of relationships that you have with people, maybe that sort of slightly blurred boundary now between, are they a work person or an out of work person, because they're contacting you at all different times, or even your identity. If you look into lots and lots of research, I find it really interesting about work and your identity. Work used to be a source of income, but now it's much more a part of our identity. I think I've mentioned before about this article about the spiritual workaholics as all identifying in our work and working constantly at it. And that just means that it's sort of harder than ever in squiggly careers to have these really definite and defined boundaries. And that means that a lot of people are compromising themselves. And we hear when we do work on confidence, Sarah mentioned in that Brené Brown quote, sort of the last part of it resonates to me a lot. It says, only when we believe deep down that we are enough can we say enough. And we talk to so many people that struggle with that enough word. They're like, that I don't know enough, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or I don't work enough. And so I think when you take this sort of contrast of the work that we're experiencing today and these blurring of boundaries, and maybe you also add this thing around the I'm not enough, whatever it is on top of it, I think there's something going on at work today that makes it really hard for people to set and stick to their own boundaries.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I was reflecting on our boundaries are way more blurred now, certainly. I think we all experience that. And I was thinking about how I worked 10 years ago versus how I work now. And I can really see in it how everything is really blurry, everything kind of blurs together. And I don't necessarily think that's all a bad thing. I think it just means that actually we are now working so differently that you've got to maintain and figure out your boundaries for yourself, because nobody else does it for you. Whereas I think if I think about how I was working 10, 11 years ago, it was so defined for me. I didn't have to give it any thought. I basically just turned up and did my job for whatever hours I was doing. And it wasn't necessarily always 9 till 5, but I did sort of turn up and do my job. And then I went home. I think I would have had a computer at home where I think if I'd have tried hard enough, I probably could have got to my emails, but it would have been hard. And most of the time I just went home and usually went and played netball and didn't really think about work until I went to work again the next day. And there was no me worrying about always my work spilling over into kind of my rest of my life. The kind of technology wasn't there for that to even be an option. And I think because it's happened gradually, I've actually spent a lot more time thinking about this in the last sort of probably 4 or 5 months, where because also I love to work, I think now it's like I've figured out, I'm like, oh, okay, but that means I could always be working to the detriment of everything else. And I don't want to do that either. So it's not that I think boundaries being blurred in itself is a bad thing, because personally I think there are a lot of benefits to all of the things that mean that now that we can work in different places and at different times and in ways that work for us as individuals. But what it does just mean is a whole load more of reflection and kind of figuring out, okay, so what does this actually kind of mean for me? What does this mean in terms of what do I need to do differently? How do I need to manage my time? How do I need to manage my technology?
There's another quote that I found actually when I was sort of digging into some of the research around boundaries that stuck with me, because I think it talks to more of the why it's really important to put some boundaries in place. If you're kind of thinking, oh, I could have some boundaries, but, I do like work and it's all been okay so far. Yeah. I think this quote kind of hits home for me about why it's really important to start thinking about this quite seriously. So it's by someone called Nelson, and we'll link to this when we post the resources at amazingif.com. But the quote is, in work or in our personal relationships, poor boundaries lead to resentment, anger, and burnout. It's almost like this incremental thing that Sarah was saying. You might not notice it, but sort of 5 years of constantly compromising yourself gradually and really blurring those boundaries so that maybe you don't have any in place by the end of that period of time. The risk is that you resent the work that you're left with. You're angry at some of the decisions that you might have made over time and not realize that you've done. And you might also end up sort of burnt out looking back at it as well. So we want to help you. We do not want that resentment, anger and burnout to be part of the future that you are taking control of. No. So let's turn a corner and let's use this podcast to turn a corner. Maybe share some of our boundaries that maybe we've got or we're trying hard to sustain and maintain at the moment. And then we're going to get into some tips, some really practical, actionable tips so that wherever you are in this kind of boundary journey at the moment, you can take some action to put them in place, whatever they look like for you. So should we start, Sarah, with, do you want to share some of your boundaries that you're working on at present?
Yes. So where I think I'm at my boundary best, if that's a if that's a phrase,
I think it should be.
It should be. My boundary best is, I think, avoiding burnout. So I actually really like working in a focused way, a driven way, relatively intense way. I think quite a few people around me would describe me in that way when I've got a project or something that I'm delivering. But I'm also good at recognising that after that period of time, I can't just keep going. And I'm good at making sure that I have, whether it's days, half days, things within a week that give me time to recover and re-energise. So sometimes that can be small things like thinking, oh, I'm working from home on a Thursday. The first thing I'm going to do on a Thursday morning is go for a walk for an hour. And sometimes the last thing you feel like doing is going for a walk for an hour because you can just, you know what the to-do list looks like. You know you've got a really busy day. You almost think, oh, an hour walk now means that I'm going to have more stuff to do at the end of the day, or maybe I'm going to have to work late. So there's so many reasons not to do it. But having those almost just moments to just relax and not be really focused. And I think I vary those depending on what I'm working on. If it's more typical busy, as I would describe it, like we're all busy most of the time, I think I'm good at all the kind of smaller in-between bits of just giving myself a break. And then when it's bigger moments of a big project, or maybe I do feel like work has been more kind of how I spend most of my time for maybe a couple of weeks, I am good at recalibrating and just saying that to myself, I think, oh, but this is not acceptable or sustainable or actually just how I want to live my life forever. But I'm really happy to do it for a bit and I enjoy it for a bit, because I was reflecting on that quote that you'd said around that's often what leads to burnout. You know, I don't want to, touch wood, say, oh, you know, that's never going to happen to me because I'm good at this one thing. But I do think I've avoided so far kind of getting down to that point of burnout for that reason, because I'm good. That's kind of me at my best, is just spotting. I just don't think I can keep going for any longer, or actually I need moments, and I know that I'm better when I do have those kind of recovery. I never actually feel guilty. So I know this is something that people sometimes struggle with a little bit around, oh, I feel guilty that I'm not working. Guilty is actually not something I feel. I sometimes feel frustrated that I'm not doing like the work things because I think I need to get through the actions, but I don't feel guilty for doing it. And even now where we run our business together, where I think it's easier to feel guilty because you sort of think, well, if I don't do it, probably it doesn't get done. So things are more reliant on you. Even now I still think, oh, going for a walk is okay. It's okay to do that. It's okay to go to yoga at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday if that one week I happen to have the time to go to yoga at 2 p.m. on a Wednesday.
Question for you. I used to have someone, a lovely person called Liz Beeden, who may well be listening to this, who used to work for me at Virgin, and she always used to say that in meetings. Question for you. And I used to make everyone stop. So here's a question for you.
Go on.
Do you think it helps or hinders you being at your boundary best having a colleague, i.e. me, who is also quite intense? The reason for the question is I can imagine, I'm just thinking about other people and their work colleagues. And let's say you want to put some boundaries in place that are good for you, but your colleagues are like, they've got really blurred boundaries and they aren't necessarily protecting theirs. Or like me, I think you and I have a similar kind of intensity. And I just wondered whether you think that affects how you set boundaries, or if it doesn't, if there's anything in that we could share with other people that might be helpful.
So I think we set boundaries in different ways. though I think we are both equally driven. I think we recover and re-energise in different ways, probably. You definitely have more capacity to keep going, I think, longer and in a more sustained way than I do. And so I think probably I just recognise that we're different. I can't imagine you just going for a walk at the start of a day for an hour. I mean, maybe in a
No.
minute you're about to tell me that you do, but I just
No,
I
I
just
don't.
don't see you doing it. I see you getting up at 5:30 and doing a career tip for Instagram, you know. So we're not that similar, really. I think we have the advantage, I'm just thinking about versus other work colleagues. I think we have the benefit of knowing each other well enough and trusting each other to such a high level that we both kind of know that we're both doing what's best for ourselves and for each other. So I think a few times perhaps you've called me and I think I've been on a walk by myself as ever, and you just sort of go, oh, you're on a walk, not very surprised, and then you just sort of leave me to it. And I think you know that it's important to me and that I wouldn't be doing it otherwise. I think that's probably what helps me is I don't ever feel, just because we don't have the same behaviour, I don't feel pressure to behave like you do.
Yeah.
And I feel supported in what I'm choosing to do. And I don't think you would ever judge me, or I don't feel like you're kind of judgmental going, oh, but we're really busy. Why is Sarah not writing that proposal or doing that action plan? I think you've got to have that trust of, well, Sarah will know what to prioritise. And if at the moment she needs to prioritise going for a walk, then that is the right thing. And that is better than Sarah getting really stressed and burning out or not doing a good job, I think.
So maybe it's actually not one of the 5 tips that we're going to share, but maybe there's something in that about if we're thinking about sort of boundaries in teams and how you can protect boundaries, maybe there is a really helpful conversation for a team to have about what does it look like for you to be at your boundary best, and what do you need from us to support you. You might say, well, you know, if my boundaries are about having a daily walk, know that if I don't reply at that time, or if I say I'm on a walk, that's like my time to be sort of in my own head and not talking to you about what's in yours, or whatever that looks like for people. But there sounds like when you said that there's trust, there's support, and there's a respect for your own boundaries. And so maybe that's something that teams could take forward.
And I think even if you said to me, which you wouldn't, oh, I don't really get why you do that, I think it's so important to me, and I feel the value of that time emotionally, like physically. I think it gives me time to think and come up with ideas and that kind of stuff. I would feel confident enough to push back and say, if you might be like, well, why are you going for a walk? I'd just go, oh, I just need it. And it wouldn't make me think, I'm not going to not do it. So even if for whatever reason we disagreed about it, I think I'd feel confident enough to stick with it. What about you?
Can't imagine I'd ever disagree with you about being like, that'd be an awful thing to do. When am I at my boundary best?
Yeah.
So I've got some hard boundaries that I feel like they're hard just because I literally can't work with them. So for example, one of my very hard boundaries is what I call like my bath time boundary. So I quite like a bath. I mean, quite a long bath, and you can't really work in the bath. So I feel like I put myself in a situation where I literally can't like have my laptop and type or do anything like that. So for me is a very good way of, if ever I feel like I'm thinking a bit too much about work, like not even doing the work, like it's just going around my head a little bit too much, I always know that spending time like in a bath on my own, like listening to music, is a very tactical thing. But my bath time boundary, I probably have 2-hour-long baths a week, and I just sit there, don't really do a lot. Obviously, maybe occasionally read something of absolutely no intellectual capacity requirements whatsoever. And my husband doesn't come in, my children don't come in, and it is bliss. That is something that I'm quite protective about, that space. Like that is a no disturb me kind of space that I have. I also have the weekend boundary with the children. So I'm not saying to anyone go and have children so you can have some boundaries, but I have that would be a bad recommendation because I'm also tired most of the time. But I can't work when I have the children. I don't have the cognitive capacity to multitask when I'm with them. Even if I wanted to, even if I thought, oh, I'll write that article, they are chatting to me in the back of a car, or they want me to go into soft play, or they want me to build Lego. I can't do anything else other than be with them. And to Sarah's point, actually, even though sometimes I do find it frustrating for lots of different reasons, but it is a very hard boundary. Like there is no blurring of that. I need to be with them, and that's all that can be. So they're two very hard boundaries for me. I think I have one that I have put in place a bit more consciously, if you know what I mean. I said to Sarah, I was writing some notes, I was like, oh, there's a thing about monkeys. She's like, what are you going on about these monkeys, Helen? So someone told me a while ago, beware of catching other people's monkeys. For some people listening, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. And for some other people, you might be like, I've no idea. But there's a book that Ken Blanchard, famous management writer, wrote about monkeys. It's like the 1 Minute Manager and Catching Monkeys, or something like that is the title. We'll link to it. And the premise of it is, my interpretation of this, is that we all carry monkeys around with us. And monkeys is almost like a sort of a metaphor for all the different jobs that we have to do and actions we have to do. Think about it like you're carrying around your to-do list, and every action on your to-do list is basically a monkey, all right? So you're carrying them, they're a weight on you, you're carrying all these monkeys. And what a lot of people like to do is throw their monkey onto somebody else, right? So they're trying to throw their monkey onto someone else's back. And I think earlier in my career, I spent a lot of time catching other people's monkeys. So I'd be like, yes, sure, I can do that. Yeah, I know how to do that. Of course I can. People didn't even have to throw them that hard at me. I'd be like, yeah, sure, I'd love to help. I'd love to do that. I can definitely do it. Sometimes because I wanted to help them. Sometimes because I thought I knew the answer and didn't even think about what I might be trading off in order to get that thing done. And I think I spent a lot of time carrying other people's monkeys around and basically blurring my boundaries all over the place. So I'd be staying late, or I'd be missing dinner with my husband, or I'd be not doing something else I wanted to do because I was basically, doing whatever I was doing with all these other monkeys, some of which were mine, some of which were other people's. I have become a lot better at not catching other people's monkeys, which is not to say I'm not helpful, but I try and help in the moment. So if someone's like, oh, I don't know what to do with this business case, or don't know what to do with my CV, I'll try and help them then and there. But what I won't say is send me it over and I'll have a look and I'll come back to you in 48 hours, which is probably what I used to do. And then I'd be thinking, oh my gosh, I've got all this stuff to do that's basically someone else's stuff. I don't know how to do it. I've become much better at thinking, how much can I help you with in this moment, rather than sort of catching a monkey and trying sorting it out later.
You know what, you are good at this. Now you're describing it. Now I understand what the monkey thing means.
Now you know what I mean.
Now I know what you mean. I actually was just thinking, I don't think I am that good at this yet. I say yet with a growth mindset starting point, listening to you talk. And I was thinking, I'd like to be better at this, because I think I do let the monkeys grab on a little bit, but then don't do a very good job, and it makes me feel bad, if you know what I mean. So I think you do a really good job of managing your monkeys in the moment. I feel like we're all about the alliteration this evening. So
that would be my advice. It's not that I don't want to be helpful, because I do, and I love helping people. But I know that if I take that monkey on, sometimes I let it fall, which is bad, because I've said to someone I'll help them and I can't. So I try as far as possible to do as much as I can in the moment. And then if I do take the monkey, I only take a few, and I take the ones that I do very, very consciously, with an understanding of when I can kind of give it back, basically.
Do you know what? I am going to commit to practicing getting better at managing monkeys in the moment, because I definitely, I commit at the moment to helping on various different things, because I really want to. Like, I'm only ever saying yes because I genuinely want to say yes. It's not like I'm going, I feel like I have to. But then I don't do a very good job of the following up. And then that's not good for the other people, and it's not good for me either, because then it plays on your mind that you've not done it, and then you've not done a good job of it. Whereas I think if I could just think, right, well, with this thing, in the next 24 hours, that's it. I'm going to do as much as I can do, and then leave it wherever it's got to, or kind of hand it over, or try and do that in what is sustainable for me to do today or by tomorrow. And then if it's not, change what that thing is.
My learning from this, if you're going to go and do this, just my one little extra bit for you, is I think you have to drop your quality bar a little bit. So let's say somebody gives me a monkey of introducing you to somebody else. They're like, say, Helen, do you know anybody who can, because I really want to know this sort of thing. And I'm like, I know someone who can do that. Now, what I would have done previously is added it to my to-do list. So put the monkey on my back, waited till my Friday when I might be at home and I suddenly got 101 things to do. What I will now do is say, yeah, not a problem. Just give me 5 minutes and I'll do it now. So I almost use the 5 minutes that I'm already with that person. And it means that maybe the introduction isn't quite as refined and perfect, but I might just be like, like, I might email someone and say, I'm just with person X. They're interested in this. They'd love to meet you. Can I please connect you to maybe explore it? If I was at home on a Friday, I probably would have spent 10 minutes writing that intro and done it all perfectly.
Yeah, that's what I would do.
So I do it in the moment, but I compromise the quality that I might do with all my thoughtfulness. But I think it's worth it because it means that I get it done.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's any the wiser that there might be a quality difference if I spent any time doing it. Anyway, I think the only person would probably be me. So yeah, that's my little add-on tip for you.
So should we move on to our 3 top tips that we've found between us in terms of looking at the different kind of boundaries, how they work, and the kind of actions that you can take to try and... I think we've probably suggested some things there just from our own experiences, but perhaps good to start talking through the tips.
Yes, okay, shall I go first?
Go for it.
So tip number 1 is, quite a nice build from the monkey management, is practice saying no and stop saying sorry. So let's take these into our sort of 2 parts. Part A is the practice saying no. I think most people don't like saying no. I don't like saying no, as in a really, really clear no, which isn't like a fudge of a, sure, I mean, I'll look into it, but I can't at the moment, but I'll definitely do it. You know, that's a fudge. An actual clean, I'm sorry, I can't.
Done that today. That's making me feel bad.
What, the fudge? Oh, yeah. No.
Someone asked me something and I fudged a no. I want to just say no, but I've done the fudge. Oh, no.
I know. So this is I think it feels uncomfortable. And it does sound a bit brutal sometimes. The actual word no sounds brutal, but I think partly because it might be, but also there's the emotional feeling of like, oh, no sounds harsh. So this tip is to find ways to say no thank you, or no, not for me at the moment, but the actual word no in your closure of an action or something. Examples of ways that you can do this might be when someone's offering you something, like, I don't know, in a restaurant when someone says, do you want another glass of wine? No, thank you, would be an answer. I very rarely say that. Or maybe dessert or something. Or if someone's trying to sell you something on the phone, maybe someone's calling you up on your mobile and they're like, oh, can I talk to you? You just say, no, thank you. Basically, try and practice. I think like 1 no a week. Put yourself on like a no diet and try and say 1 no a week for a month.
I think that sounds really hard.
I know.
The word
that doesn't count.
Do you think though, okay, so this is you can tell me if you think I'm already fudging this.
Go on.
So I'm genuinely trying to imagine myself being as direct as that. I'm finding it really difficult because tonally it doesn't sit well with me. And how important is it to just be more direct versus actually having to say no?
I think you should find a way to do it to work out whether the thing that's holding you back is your association with the word no or the social appropriateness of the word no. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'm also, the other thing that's going through my head is I don't think people say no to me very often. I can't think of any examples of where I see it written or have it said to you commonly. I get the principle of to set the boundaries, you've got to be able to push back on those boundaries.
Yes.
And you've got to be able to say, oh no, sorry, I'm not able to do that. Yeah, but you see, even there, in my example, I said sorry straight away.
And that's the stop saying sorry bit. I think
no, I can't do this one. It's too hard. I can't do it yet. I think no is quite brutal, but I think it's about being almost like you're choosing not to use it, whereas at the moment I think you're just like dismissing it. And so me too, I would fudge things sometimes, but I think it's about, can I confidently protect my boundaries? And that might mean you saying, no, actually that's not possible at the moment. One other thing that I could suggest is, I think it's the no and sorry, or the out and out fudge that we're trying to stop. So you can say, no, it's not possible because this, or no, I can't do that at the moment. Here's another suggestion. But I think it's the, no, I'm sorry, I can't at the moment. It's that we're trying to get away from. Yeah, do you know what the thing I said I fudged my no on today? I basically used being busy as an excuse. And I sort of went, not yet, but maybe in the future. So basically left the door open. And actually, it is just a no. I just couldn't find a way to say it. In terms of being able to protect your boundaries and protect your time, you've not done a good job, because that person could very reasonably and rationally come back to you because you've not been definitive.
Yeah, I think it's the definitive
hard.
decline. Practice
That's
a
nice.
definitive decline,
Yeah, I'm going to
which
write that
might
down.
sound like, no, I can't do that at the moment, or that's not possible right now, or that's not possible. Here's something else that I suggest. Whatever your definitive decline is, that's a thing I think to practice saying so that you know that you are in control of your boundaries, or you can be if you choose to be.
Okay, that's what I'll do. I'm going to
Okay.
practice my
I feel
definitive
like you're getting quite a
decline.
few tips out of this.
So, tip number 2 is about preparing for pushback. And I was reflecting on this in terms of probably the one time in my career where my boundaries were really pushed. I was in a job that was quite a 24/7 job, and I worked for a boss who was a 24/7 boss. And one of my boundaries was that I did things connected to work but not at work. So this was probably early days of Amazing If, when I was running some development things outside of my day job, often in the evenings, but would obviously leave my day job to go and do those things. I decided that that was really important to me, important to my general enjoyment of life. It wasn't like I was thinking, I need to build up a Amazing If empire ready for 4 or 5 years' time when we're going to run our business together.
You're laughing because I bet you're like, that does sound nice.
Yeah, like I sort of thing I probably would say, but it wasn't. It was because I think I recognised how much I enjoyed and got value and was learning from those other things. So I did have a boundary of, I'm not going to work every single hour. I am going to leave and go and do some of these other things. And probably only at that time, maybe once a week, I think it was, when I was running a specific program, that boundary got really challenged by the person I was working for. And I think if you can imagine or visualize what could happen in terms of your boundaries getting crossed or being challenged, and just how are you going to handle those moments, what are you going to do, because that will happen sometimes. You will have those moments, and sometimes people might not even know that they are crossing that boundary. I had moments definitely in that job where you're perhaps leaving and you sort of get a bit of a look, there's kind of or you think you're getting a bit of a look, or perhaps even someone saying, oh Sarah, have you finished this thing yet, or can you do this tonight, and they sort of know that you're leaving to go and do something different. That's where you've got to be confident enough to respond or explain. And I think for the boundaries that really matter to you, if you have the sort of relationship, I think particularly with your manager and your peers, where you can share those boundaries, I think that goes a long way. So in that situation, I was good at sharing my boundaries and saying, this is the thing I do on a Monday night. It's really important to me. Almost like you need to tell me if this is a complete no-go or just not acceptable. I need to know now. But, it was very much in my own time. And I think almost that's the easier bit. I think the rational bit here is the easier bit, because most people are reasonable. Most people get that how people have other things in their life. I think it's more the emotional bit of every single Monday when I was leaving, I'd feel bad and would feel like I wasn't probably supported. I would almost have to tell myself every week that boundary matters, that boundary is important to me. So there's almost the rational things you can do, sharing your boundaries, putting any more triggers or mechanisms in place to make sure that boundary can kind of work for you and your job and your boss, all those kind of things. I think it's more just the resilience to be strong enough to go, I am going to leave now to go to the gym, or I am going to leave now so that I can get back to do the homework with my kid, because I know that yes, this meeting might go on for another 3/4 of an hour, but I've been really clear that I do have to leave at this time, or I've been really clear that I'm training to be a Pilates teacher at the moment and I have a class every Monday at this particular time. I even did it last week. I had booked to go to yoga at a weird time. It was like 3 p.m. or something in the afternoon, and I nearly missed the start of the class just because I was getting quite into an article I was writing for us. I mean, that is just stupid. But it was almost a bit of like or even in my own head, I was like, oh, I'm quite into this at the moment. And then I thought, but no, I know this is really important. And so I almost stressed myself out a little bit by literally arriving like 30 seconds before it was about to start. But I'm still really glad that I kept the boundary of thinking, I know I need these moments, back to my previous point of rest and relaxation, etc. And it makes me better at work. And I'm sure that article was better because I did actually stick to it.
You've not mentioned it, but one boundary I think you were amazing at protecting, that I'm sure some people listening will maybe have trying to maintain this boundary, is when you started to work part-time at Sainsbury's and you had, I can't remember if it was consistently a Friday off, it was another day, but you had obviously you worked 4 days a week at Sainsbury's,
I think
and you
it was
did one day a week.
Friday originally and then a Thursday
Friday?
it became, yeah.
You were amazing at that. So what happened was Sarah started to work part-time at Sainsbury's. So 4 days a week at Sainsbury's, 1 day a week on like Amazing If and some other things that Sarah was working on at the time. And around about the same time, sort of partly inspired by Sarah, I was kind of trialing. I'd gone back to work at Virgin after my first child, Henry, and I was trialing a sort of compressed hours type of thing because I didn't really want to drop my salary because my childcare costs were going up and all kinds of things that happened in my life. So I was sort of trialing this compressed hour thing that would have given me the Friday to work on Amazing If. Now, I really struggled, and I was struggling so much that my manager told me to stop saying sorry. So please don't listen to this and think I've kind of nailed all this sorry, not saying sorry thing. Because he was like, I've never heard you say sorry so much, because I was constantly apologising for like not being able to come to a certain meeting or not being able to do something else. And I was actually so bad at protecting my boundaries that whole way of working just didn't work for me. At the time, I just couldn't do it. Whereas Sarah, you were brilliant. You were really, really good at protecting that boundary. And I'm sure there'll be some people listening that are maybe also working part-time and trying to protect that boundary and maybe struggling. Is there anything in your experience there that helped you?
Do you know what I think? And this is completely irrational, but I think the way I did my 4-day week, both when I did it at Sainsbury's and then when I did it later at another company, and this is pre and post having kids, was I took a pay cut of just a straight kind of 20% pay cut. So work one less day, get paid 20% less. And I think because that is quite a straightforward thing, I thought, oh, well, obviously I now work 20% less for that company because they pay me 20% less. Now, funnily enough, I didn't extend that to, oh, well, would you ever work in an evening, or would you ever work at a weekend, or all of which I would do, not all of the time. But there was something about that day where I think it was so definitive that in my mind it really helped to create a line where I thought, well, I've made a compromise and I've made a choice here, and this is very much my choice. So I am choosing to do this, to do something else that I'm really passionate about. And if I don't use it, well, then what am I gaining? Back to the whole give-gain thing. It's like, well, from this I am giving back 20% of my salary. And, I'm giving, some of my time away in terms of kind of physically being there and that kind of thing. And the organisation, I think, were giving me a lot as well. They were prepared for me to be in kind of senior roles and to be there less. But what I am gaining is that opportunity to spend a day on something that really matters to me. And if I don't use that, I think it's the opportunity cost of, I would have felt like I was really wasting something that I had worked hard to make happen. And I did have that thing of, obviously, if it was an emergency, someone could always call me on that day that I wasn't working. I never had to protect it, as in not be transparent about it. So I was always very transparent about the day I wasn't working, because that makes life easier. My team all knew that they could call me in an emergency. I also wasn't really in jobs that had massive emergencies. I was in really important big jobs that I really enjoyed, and I had done previously slightly different roles. There was very unlikely to be something that couldn't wait until the next day. And it's a pragmatic point, but I do think you can make boundaries easier for yourself if you also think about, can I put myself in a situation that makes these boundaries more likely to work? I think I started a 4-day week when I was in a corporate affairs team, and that's harder because that's a much more reactive team. And then once I was in more of a strategic role, it was much easier because that's more of a proactive role. And actually, even when I was thinking about what I was going to do after maternity leave, again, I looked for strategic roles where things could probably wait 95% of the time until the next day, which most of the time they can in reality. So yeah, I think that's why, that always kind of worked for me. And now I work 5 days a week again.
Yes, that's true. Also, just one other thing, I think listening to you, when you talked about that, well, if I was dropping 20% of my time, then that was the reflective in what I was delivering for them. You have a real clear sense of worth, the worth of your time when you're describing that. And it just takes me right back to that Brené Brown quote that we started with, where she said, we can't base our own worthiness on others' approval. I think in that situation, you had a real clear sense of your worth and your impact, and you being paid for that worth. And therefore, if you were being paid less, you were going to manage that time accordingly. I think that takes a lot of confidence,
Maybe
which is really good.
Myself a bit.
No, but I think that's something that people can learn from. Like, you need to have a strong sense of value and worth and know where you add value, I think, to be confident in protecting those sort of boundaries like you did. So third one then, the third and last tip is to get a boundary buddy, which sounds a bit flippant, but this is effectively, this is somebody that you trust. I think maybe someone that can challenge you a little bit, that you share with them the boundaries that you want to maintain. So, for example, if I said to Sarah, one of the boundaries I want to have is that I don't want to work on the weekend, and one day a week I want to do a half day or something like that, so that I can do exercise, spend time with my children, learn, whatever the reason for that boundary is, then talking to Sarah and letting her know about that would mean that she could help me to protect my boundaries. And I think this is particularly important if you feel, maybe if you're setting them up for the first time, so before they feel like they're really fixed and they've just become a habitual part of how you're working. I think particularly if you're trying to put new boundaries in place, having somebody that knows about them and can help you to protect them. And if you feel like you're, like, maybe they can call you if it looks like you're compromising those boundaries, and then maybe you can kind of hit boundary reset again. Just think about maybe who might be in your support network that could help you to protect your boundaries, that you could talk to them about with trust, as particularly if you're just starting them off for the first time.
So who's your boundary buddy, Helen? Am I meant to be your boundary buddy?
Yeah, I think you are. I think my husband is as well. Like, he's pretty good at being my boundary buddy.
Well, I'm just thinking, I don't think I try hard enough. If I'm meant to be doing that, I think I need to start being a bit more active in that role.
You don't. I tell you, my husband doesn't come in when I have my bath. He knows about that. I also think we've maybe got some unexplicit weekend boundaries that we both have in place. I think we're respectful of the boundaries we put around our time at the weekends. But I don't know, at the moment, I feel like I'm not putting any new ones in place. So I think if I was about to put some new ones in place, I might enlist you more as a boundary buddy. But right now, I feel pretty happy with where my boundaries are. I'm not drowning in monkeys. I feel like I'm in an okay place at the moment. But will you be my boundary buddy if I need one?
Always. I love it. I love the idea of having to hold you to account to things.
I bet you do. Would you like to summarise tonight's 3 tips before you go on a power trip?
I would. So tip number 1 was practice saying no and stop saying sorry. Number 2 was prepare for pushback, both rationally and emotionally. And number 3 was find and make friends with the boundary buddy. And if tonight's podcast has been useful, there are a couple of other episodes that we would recommend you listen to that are related. The first is How to Manage Stress. That's episode 29. Because often I think we are particularly interested in boundaries at the point where they're not working. If they're working quite well, we're perhaps less conscious of them, albeit I think, like we said, we're getting more and more proactive. And another episode that could be useful is How to Prioritise Your Work, which is episode 95.
And also, in case any of you would like to come and experience some Squiggly Careers training, which Sarah and I do lots and lots of, the real day job outside of doing the podcast is that we work with lots of organisations running programmes to help with career development, and we sometimes also do different open courses that people can come to. And one of those open courses that we have set up for March is a pretty special one. It's one that we've never done before outside the companies that we work with. It is a 1-day 5 skills to succeed in a Squiggly career course. It's effectively the book brought to life. So if you would like to be part of a room of 100 people who are all committed to their career development, looking to be inspired and informed and take actions away with them, this could be the day for you. We've hired an amazing space. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, it's lovely.
We've also got a really nice lunch. Also quite excited about that.
Also great.
Quite like food. For £100, you get the full day's course, which is us going through values, strengths, confidence, network and future. You get a copy of the book, you get your lunch, and you'll also get to meet Sarah and I if that's important to you, but you also will get to spend some time with some other people who are hopefully in the same sort of headspace as you. What we find with the community that sort of wraps itself around Squiggly Careers is that it's a really positive community of people who are really trying to take ownership for their career and they just want some more tools and advice, but it's a great community to be part of. So if that feels like a good thing for you, if you just search for Amazing If on Google or wherever you were searching for it, and you'll see us on Eventbrite. We will also post about it on LinkedIn, and we'll post about it. There's a link to it on Instagram at Amazing If under our bio. So you should be able to find it anywhere. And if you can't, just email us at getintouch@amazingif.com and we will send you the link. But it's £100, 23rd of March. It's in London at a place called Fora, and it should be a really, really good day.
And so thank you to everyone who continues to listen. If you do get the chance to rate, review, subscribe on Apple, you know by now that really helps every podcast. So if it's a podcast that you like and appreciate enough to spend 5 minutes doing that, we would be really grateful. We read every single review. I say it all the time, but I do think our podcast reviews in particular just bring a little bit of sparkle and shine to our week. They're always really...
I love that. Sparkle and shine.
Yeah, they're always so nice to read. So if you've been listening for a while and perhaps you think, I keep meaning to do that, that'd be a good thing for you to do as spring comes around. That could be your spring resolution. And next week, we're going to be talking about making sure your strengths show up and stand out at work. So we have talked a little bit about strengths before, but we feel like it's a topic that's really important, particularly this time of year as we're all going for new jobs or perhaps going through redundancies, as we talked about at the start of the podcast. Loads and loads of change, so never a better time to just be really confident in the value that you add. So we thought that would be a good topic to revisit and kind of look at in a new way next week. But for now, thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you again next week.